There's a common joke among travellers that in Alaska, everything is trying to kill you. Like most jokes, it's only funny because it's half true. Alaska is a place of almost impossibly sublime beauty, but the sheer scale of its wilderness is humbling, and that wilderness does not forgive mistakes. Across the United States, thousands of hikers vanish into forests every year. Most are found, often disoriented but safe. A handful simply disappear, becoming ghosts in the landscape. On the morning of August 3rd, 2025, a 69-year-old hiker named Thomas Casey stepped out of his hotel near Juneau. He smiled at the clerk, mentioning he was just off for a quick loop. He would never be seen alive again. 41 hours later, a search and rescue dog would find his body wedged 140 feet deep inside a glacial crevasse. This wasn't a novice hiker who wandered off a path. This was an experienced, meticulous planner. So what happened? What series of seemingly small decisions led this man to such a tragic and lonely end? And more importantly, what can we learn from the last choices Thomas Casey ever made? Thomas Casey was an electrical engineer by trade and a father who found deep satisfaction in precision and order. His friends described him with a compelling contradiction: methodical but fearless. This was a man who didn't just buy maps, he laminated his own topographical charts. He didn't just have a GPS, he owned 2 separate, sophisticated satellite tracking devices. This trip to Alaska was a milestone, the 49th state he and his wife, Linda, planned to visit together. And yet, in a decision that still haunts everyone who knew him, he made a fateful choice that morning. Inside the hotel safe, he left behind both his Garmin and his spot trackers, 2 devices that could have pinpointed his location anywhere on the globe. His plan for the day was the Thunder Nugget Loop, a well-regarded 14-mile trek that runs beside the magnificent Mendenhall Glacier. It's a trail that offers breathtaking views of the ice, but it demands respect. At the visitor center, another small deviation from his methodical nature occurred. Instead of loading the GPX file he'd carefully downloaded onto a dedicated device, he simply snapped a quick photo of the large wall map with his phone, a backup but a fragile one. He sent a text to his wife, a casual message saying he'd call her when he got back to Wi-Fi. He never specified which trail he was taking. He never gave her an estimated time of return. At 7:49 a.m, a trail camera captured the last known image of him. He was starting his hike, shouldering a pack so small and light it looked more like a child's school bag. The contents of that pack would later become a crucial part of his story. Inside, a single bottle of water, 2 granola bars, a paper-thin rain jacket and a headlamp he'd never tested. 8 miles into the hike, the official trail makes a clear bend to the south, but at that junction, another path continues straight. It's what hikers call a social trail, an unofficial shortcut worn into the earth by the repeated footsteps of people seeking a quicker route or a better view. Thomas, an experienced hiker, would have known the difference between a maintained trail and a user-created path, but the allure of a better photograph, a more dramatic perspective of the glacier, was too strong to resist. That quarter-mile detour, a small gamble for a better view, stretched into 3 long, arduous miles. The easy marked path devolved into a rugged, exhausting scramble over a field of slick, moss-covered boulders. At 11:03 a.m, he stopped to send a message to his daughter, but his phone, which he hadn't fully charged before leaving the hotel, was dead. The pieces were now falling into place for a tragedy. No one knew his specific location. He had no way to call for help. In the cold, technical language of search and rescue teams, Thomas Casey was now a clueless solo, a lone hiker with no shared plan and no form of live communication. By 12:15 p.m, the magnificent view he had risked so much for was gone, erased by a thick, wet fog that descended with astonishing speed, a hallmark of Alaskan weather. His ultralight jacket, designed for a brief shower on a dry Arizona trail, was completely soaked within minutes. The persistent, bone-chilling Alaskan downpour saturated him, and the first stages of hypothermia began their silent, deadly work. He tried to retrace his steps, but the rain had washed away any clear sign of his path. Panic began to set in, and with it, a common and tragic mistake. He started climbing. He believed that higher ground would offer him a better vantage point to get his bearings, but it only pulled him deeper into danger, further from the trail and closer to the ice. At 1:47 p.m, his foot slipped on a patch of wet, slick lichen. He slid uncontrollably for 30 feet down a steep rock face, his body slamming into a granite boulder with sickening force. The pain in his thigh was immediate and overwhelming, but he found he could still limp. Adrenaline and a desperate will to survive pushed him onward. He forced himself to move downhill, hoping to find the main glacier runoff, which would surely lead him back toward the lake and the visitor center. But his sense of direction was now completely skewed. He was unknowingly following a side canyon, a natural funnel that led not to safety, but directly into a treacherous crevasse field. These deep cracks in the glacier, some hundreds of feet deep, are often hidden by thin coverings of snow called snow bridges. At 3:02 p.m, one such rotted snow bridge gave way beneath his weight. The world disappeared from under him. He dropped into the chilling blue darkness of the glacier. He fell 140 feet before landing with crushing impact, shattering his femur and breaking several ribs. Miraculously, he was still alive, but he was trapped. The temperature inside the crevasse hovered around 42 degrees, and a relentless, chilling wind siphoned away his remaining body heat. He had one last hope. He took out his untested headlamp, switched it to its flashing SOS mode, and wedged it between two rocks, pointing the beam upward toward the sky. It was his only beacon, a tiny pulse of light in a vast, indifferent wilderness. To fight off the inevitable descent into hypothermia, he did the only thing he could think of. He sang. His voice, hoarse and weak, echoed off the ancient ice walls as he sang Johnny Cash songs, songs of struggle and redemption. It was a profoundly human act in a profoundly inhuman place. Around 6:15 p.m, the headlamp's battery, his last link to hope, flickered and died. He slipped into unconsciousness shortly after. The coroner would later conclude his death was due to the combined effects of hypothermia and his severe injuries. The next morning, his wife Linda, now deeply worried, realised he was officially missing and called the hotel. By 8:17 a.m, Juneau Mountain Rescue, JMR, an all-volunteer organisation, was activated, but the challenge they faced was immense. They were tasked with searching a wilderness area larger than the state of Rhode Island, with only a vague description of a man who went for a quick loop. Without a GPS track from a satellite beacon, without even a specific trail name, the odds were grim. JMR deployed their most effective asset for a search this broad, 4 dog teams. A 2-year-old black Labrador named Kiska, an air scent dog, was one of them. Unlike tracking dogs that follow a specific scent on the ground, air scent dogs work by detecting microscopic human skin cells carried on the wind, following the scent to its most concentrated point. At the fork, where the social trail split from the main loop, Kiska caught Thomas's scent. She followed that invisible trail of skin cells for another 1.5 miles, leading her handler through the rugged terrain Thomas had struggled across. Finally, she stopped at the edge of the crevasse field and began to bay, the signal that she had found the location. Rescuers rappelled into the fissure at 2:31 p.m, a full 41 hours after Thomas had first set out. They found his body deep within the ice. His bright red cap, a small speck of colour in the blue darkness, was still visible. Thomas Casey's story is a tragedy built upon 4 critical, compounding errors. Errors that can serve as lessons for anyone who ventures into the wild. First, no shared plan. A simple, detailed text message could have changed everything. A message like, starting the Thunder Nugget loop, should be back by 6 p.m, would have triggered an alarm that very evening. A search could have begun while he was likely still alive, huddled in the crevasse with his headlamp flashing. Not sharing his specific plan cost him more than a day of potential search time. Second, underestimating Alaska. Thomas was an experienced hiker, but his experience was primarily on the hot, dry trails of Arizona. He tragically misjudged the brutal and fast-changing nature of Alaskan weather. His desert kit, minimal water and a light jacket, was no match for the bone-chilling, persistent rain. In the wild, your gear must match the worst-case scenario of your environment, not the best. Third, going ultralight. Not underprepared, he chose to leave behind 3 items that, combined, weighed less than a single bottle of Gatorade. An emergency bivy sack could have protected him from the wind and rain, fighting off hypothermia. A small first aid kit might have allowed him to better treat his initial injuries. And most critically, his 3.5-ounce Garmin InReach mini satellite communicator has a one-press SOS button that sends a distress signal and location to a 24/7 emergency response centre. Pushing that button would have almost certainly kept him alive. Fourth, the solo penalty. Hiking alone doesn't cause mistakes, but it amplifies their consequences exponentially. With a partner, a twisted ankle is an anecdote told over dinner. When you are alone, it can become a death sentence. Experience is not a substitute for backup. No matter how skilled you are, you can't splint your own shattered femur or pull yourself out of a crevasse. If you have ever sent a vague text like heading out for a quick hike, take a moment and open the Notes app on your phone. The next time you go out, drop a pin of your trailhead. Write down the name of the trail and your estimated return time. Send that information to someone you trust, someone who you know will call for help if you're late. It takes 30 seconds. That small act can triple your chances of coming home safe. Thomas's story is a heartbreaking tragedy, but it is not unique. Search and rescue teams see this pattern with chilling familiarity. A solo hiker, an incomplete or non-existent itinerary, no satellite communication device, and an unexpected turn in the weather. Modern technology, the very technology Thomas owned but left in his hotel, could have rewritten this story. Devices like a Garmin InReach Mini, a Spot X, or even a newer iPhone with emergency SOS via satellite allow you to send a distress signal from almost anywhere on Earth. They cost less than the gas it takes to get to many trailheads. They can pay you back with your life. The moment you think you might be lost, the single most important thing to do is to remember the acronym STOP, STOP. The moment you feel disoriented, cease all movement, think, calm your mind, and assess the situation without panic. Observe, look at your surroundings, listen for sounds, and check your gear. Plan, make a rational plan. Sometimes the best plan is to stay exactly where you are. Panic makes you wander, and a moving target is incredibly difficult to find. A stationary target is found, on average, 4 times faster. A JMR team leader who worked on the recovery of Thomas Casey told me something that has stuck with me. When you share your plan, when you carry a beacon, you're not just protecting yourself, you're protecting us, the volunteers who leave our families and our jobs to come looking. She paused for a moment. I still see that red cap in my sleep. Thomas Casey set out to see something magnificent, and in his pursuit, he never came home. His story serves as a mirror. Anyone who has ever loved the outdoors has, at some point, cut a corner. We've all skipped a check-in text, left an extra layer of clothing behind to save weight, or pushed on when we should have turned back. The wilderness is beautiful, but it punishes ego with an unforgiving equality. So next time you lace up your boots, remember the man with the beat-up Merrells. Tell someone exactly where you are going. Pack for the worst possible weather, not the best. Carry a way to call for help and know when to turn around, because the greatest, most important summit you will ever reach is your own front door.